AVC. So today I watched a new video from Michael, noted and archived, his top 10 of the 90s. And recently I've had some people ask me if I do ranking videos. And I see that lots of people are starting to do those. So I don't know if I should do that exactly, but I thought like, the 90s, yeah, that's when I started to buy records. That's where I probably have, when my expertise starts in many regards, like with personal experience. So I thought I'd look at my records and let's do the 50 best LPs, vinyl, records released on vinyl during the 90s. No specific order, not even really in order, like in chronological order. No, let's just like we'll have some music in the background. Just survey a few. Unfortunately, yeah, 50 records. No way I'm gonna do snippets of everything for just the one that would make the video not seeable by YouTube. So probably the most important album of the 90s for me. I'm gonna say that many times. Spaceman 3, Recurring, their last album before everyone split in their own direction. I know many people prefer the early stuff. This one's got Big City, which is my favorite song from them. I love this artwork as well. Yeah, there it is, yeah. Spaceman 3, Recurring. Lots of good songs, just like the one we're listening to right now. I love you. What I love about the Spaceman 3 is how they are at the same time the essence of rock and roll and also the essence of avant-garde, referencing La Monte Young, Delia Derbyshire, like referencing a lot of the experimental music from the 60s, 70s, before the culture caught up with all that, before the Wire was getting interested in all that. So yeah, very important band for me. Especially, I remember first hearing them on the compilation in their, like maybe in 91 or so, and thinking this is a bit freaky, but very quickly I got my Morbers back in order and realized this is it. Another album really crucial for me and for the 90s. I've shown this before and I know some people are about it, but come on. Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, the Aphex Twin. This is Aphex Twin doing ambient for real, because Selected Ambient Works Volume 1 is barely ambient, but this one is almost like some tracks are almost like Satie, Eric Satie tracks, and you still get this sound, this very specific sound that like within seconds you know this is Aphex Twin. There's very few people in electronic music that can achieve that good. And then an album I really enjoy actually. I grew to enjoy it more and more over the years, and that's my favorite album from him, Death in June. This is this is signed by Douglas Pierce. It was bought like that, I didn't meet him. This is from 1997, 8? I'm not sure. Anyways, it's like, I don't even know the title. I never been able to figure it out. But this is from 97, yeah. It also features a CD, a bonus CD, with songs with John Balance from Coil. Anyways, yeah, this is a really great album that deserves wider recognition, and that should also set the record right about Death in June not being the band that many people believe, or at least not at that time. Next, something that I believe most people missed back then in the 90s. I loved it when it came out. I know everyone is obsessed with My Bloody Valentine, Kevin Shields. Well, his little brother, Jimmy Shields. This is the first album of Roller Skate Skinny. The second one is no good at all, in my opinion, or very pop. This is noise, shoegaze, avant, experimental pop. Lots of guitars, incredible inventiveness in the effects, the use of looping guitars, and this is stellar. And lots of tracks that go in very different directions, and still it makes sense. It's yeah, shoulder voices. There's a couple of EPs around that are well worth getting as well. Shoegaze. Okay, some of you hopefully saw my video about Seafeel, Kike, first album by Seafeel, and well, just go check my previous video if you want to know about this. This is fantastic. This is like bridging 80s rock, shoegaze to dub and electronic music in the most satisfactory way. Next, next is an album from 1991. I'll show you it right after because it has got no cover, it's just a label. This is Freestyle Fellowship, To Whom It May Concern. Their first album. Of course, many people know Dell, Da Funky Homo Sapien, Souls of Mischief. Well, it all started there. This is one of the best hip-hop albums, in my opinion, ever. Like, really no filler. And one single LP, so no, just perfect. And it was almost self-released, like on Sun Records, not Elvison. Then one very important album for more noisy music, Pure by Godflesh. Grindcore noise, almost drony at points. Robert Hampson from Maine and Loop plays some guitars on that as well. This is from 94, I believe. Fantastic artwork. Just imagine, very much before its time. This is what grindcore would be if you mixed it with, I don't know, with with drone music and maybe even Joy Division in a way, because there's a coldness to this that is very special, very almost post-punk in a way. Absolutely, like their best album, even if they got many good ones. Then Square Pusher, Music is Rooted in One Note. This is Square Pusher's fifth album on Warp. This is kind of like an industrial soft machine in a way. This is Square Pusher. Square Pusher is kind of drum and bass-ish in a way. It's very fast tempo. He's kind of like Jaco Pastorius of electronic music, but at the same time, this one he kind of cools it down a little bit on the fusion aspect. And there's another album from his later called Ultra Visitor, even better in my opinion. Some better songs, but this as a whole is a really great album. Really impossible to describe in terms of genre unless you you name check 10 different genres. Really essential music. Next, I'll just prepare what comes next. Next is the band I've talked all the time. Nurse Uzun, Second Pirate Session. Well, this is another one because in '94 came out Rock and Roll Station, which is for many people Nurse Uzun's career high. And I tend to agree in a way, but it was also the first album I bought from them. It was only released on CD back then. And then a few years later, alternate takes of this came out in the fashion of this, which are basically like almost slightly different takes on the tracks of the album. Then it was even released on the original album on the vinyl. But this more grounded Nurse Uzun with like steady rhythms, kind of like brooding vocals, kind of like reminding you of Faust and minimalism and almost hip-hop, which is interesting because after in the late 90s he toyed with the idea of releasing a hip-hop album with MCs, mostly female MCs. Now something different. Infinity, Skynet. This is Juan Atkins of Model 500 fame, one of the true originators of techno from Detroit. He started out like, I believe in 84, 85, and this is an album from the mid-90s with lots of references to, of course, the Terminator metaphor. But this is just fantastic techno, electro, with very cool melodies. And just an all perfect album. Next, and this was released on Tresor, the famous German label. Next is the Face Healers. The Face Healers were one of the very first bands signed on Too Pure, the label of Seafield, Stereolab, PG Harvey, etc. Laika. This is kind of if the Pixies' biggest influence had been Neu, even maybe a little bit of Kraftwerk or Can, but Neu, La Düsseldorf Neu. So this is kind of krautish noise punk rock with very like basic motoric bass lines and kind of this is really cool. And they got two albums and both are absolutely marvelous, but this is the first one. Next, a record I kind of mentioned in my Seafield video, Locust. The Truth is Born of Arguments. Some Seafield connections there, but like the music is much covers a much wider spectrum: industrial, electropop, tribal, ethnographical music, techno. And this was released on Apollo RNS in '95. This is one of the few early 90s albums of techno, or not necessarily club techno, records that holds as a whole. It is a really interesting album throughout, and lots of diversity, variety. Next, well, we could talk about what's playing in the background. This is Flying Saucer Attack, FSAA. This is his third album, I believe. And yeah, as you can hear, this is kind of psychedelic, lo-fi, creepy music in a way. It's kind of like one of perfect alternate soundtrack to Twin Peaks in a way. But Further is really one of my favorite albums of his, and fantastic cover. Next we got something not too different, but yeah. This is Avec le Danum from Stars of the Lead. Flying Saucer Attack is from Bristol. This is from Texas. This is what's his name again? He used to be the sound engineer for Lab Redford and part of some other bands, and this is his I believe his second or third album. This was on the Belgium label Sub Rosa. This is an LP, but I like to play it on 45, as it is. This is like a drone record, almost only made out of guitars, I believe. And when you play it at a faster speed, you get the harmonics that liberate themselves even more spectacular. But like both speeds are really good. So it's an album much worth having on vinyl. Now, a classic, a record that is soon to enter many people's collection, thankfully, after 30 years of being out of print. Love Secret Domain by Coil. LSD. As you can see, this Stephen Stapleton from Nurse's Moon cover really is something. This is an album. It is kind of like pagan, psychedelic, post-club, acid, pastoral music. Very, very difficult to pinpoint. It's a fantastic album. Like, I'll probably talk about it later again. So next we got what do we got? Yes, let's play this directly. An album connected to a band I mentioned earlier in this top 50. So this is quite an interesting concept. This is really one of my favorite albums. Experimental audio research, the Kerner experiment. Ear. This is the experimental audio research is Sonic Boom from the Spaceman 3, and with Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine, Kevin Martin from The Bug right now, Techno Animal back then, and many other projects, God, and Eddie Prévost from AMM, the improv band. And this is a whole album of reinventions, recreations, remixes of the best drone band from the 90s, Experimental Audio Research, retooled into these minimal techno, like the pulse is not even a beat, like a drum. So there's this railroad quality that probably influenced jazz in a way, but this is something totally different than the Kerner experiment. This is Thomas Kerner, and the drone artist who's also known as Porter Ricks for his more techno, minimal techno work, which is great, by the way. But this was released on Kevin Shields' Sonic Boom Space Age Recordings label in 98, I believe. The CD came out on Mille Plateau, but yeah, this was like a joint venture between Sonic Boom's label and Mille Plateau, the great German label. Mille Plateau, Gilles Deleuze. Anyways, something along the same, from the same world, or Biosphere's second album. A very important historical album, since this is an album that introduced techno to the mainstream audience, as the single from this was used in a Levi's TV commercial, like a worldwide advertising campaign. Novelty Waves, the track, but this is there's lots of great ambient tracks, like really creepy, some pretty beautiful, some beat tracks. It's Norwegian again on Apollo RNS, the Belgium label. Really fantastic electronic music, techno album. Now, a record that is a little bit interesting. Transition, La Bradford's very first album, and the first release on Cranky. This was released only as this weird white label, a double LP with an insert. So there was no real cover apart from the inserts, and this is really some of the best music from the 90s, or some of the music that would set the tone for a lot of music from the 90s, as you can hear, and even further. Next, back to, I didn't check that it was going to be so soon, but very close again to the Spaceman 3, Sonic Boom's first solo album. Entitled Spectrum, which would be his next project. This is quite some of the best LP cover art ever, with this I don't know how to qualify this kinetic art. Well, this cover tells you everything you need to know about the kind of music inside this. This is pure rock and roll, but also in the most like kind of like if Roy Orbison did ambient ballads with some wall of noise, and the organ is a big, the electric organ is a big part of the instrumentation there. So next, just showed another album from this band, but this is not exactly the same project. Coil, Black Light District. This was a very instrumental album when it came out. This was the first Coil album I purchased when it was released. It changed a lot of things for me. This is kind of the album where they really set this concept of glitch music, which is partly due to Drew McDowell, who I mean, this is Coil is Peter Christopherson and John Balance, with an ongoing, a rotating pool of musicians. And this one features Otto Avery, Drew McDowell, Louise Weasel, and just a few others. And this is very, how would I put it? Melodic, industrial, psychedelic, glitchy, but with some great singing performances, almost pop. There's this track called Blue Rats that is very monotonous, but almost a pop tune. This is a great album, also with a Steven Stapleton cover. This got reissued 2 years ago. This was the original, obviously. Talking about Glitch, another album very important for the 90s in my opinion. Oval, Systemisch. Also music that, an album that introduced experimental electronic music to general audiences, as a track of this was used in an ongoing TV commercial worldwide campaign for a perfume for Armani, I believe. I'm not sure, Givenchy or something like that. Anyways, this is pure Glitch in the sense that the music is made solely, I believe, out of skipping CDs and rearranged and edited. And as aggressive as that sound, the music is quite the opposite. This is kind of almost kind of Hawaiian, ambientish Hawaiian music. Like there's like a very nice flow to it that is very difficult to describe. Let's play just randomly one song there and see if I'm full of shit. This was also released on Mille Plateau, one of the best labels of the 90s. Next, an album that also features one track that has a lot to do with Hawaiian music. One of the best pop albums of the 90s, Ooey Zooey by Payment. I really love their first album, but this one is more commercial in a way, but it's perfect. It's like less repetitive and lots of diversity. The artwork is terrible, like it's one of the worst covers I've ever seen, but yeah, this is one of the landmark pop albums of the 90s that defined the music that came much later. When this came out, this was only interesting for indie crowds, and the indie crowds were like so much smaller than what we know now. Like that was like the weird kids in school that was listening to this. And next, strangely enough, probably my favorite live album, and it is electronic music. The Orb, Evil 93, Live 93. Bro, Evil 39. This is a 4 LP set of live versions of most of their early songs, so it's extended cuts, much even more dubby. Very fun sometimes, good vocal, like speech samples and odd samples. This is a really great ambient dub. An album that I believe many people should get. Now, one album that most people don't know, if I'm honest with myself. Shaki's first and a soul album under that alias. She later changed her name to Anifa Wahida and released a CD that was amazing. But this came out in '93, and this is kind of the very first chapter of the whole New York boom bap scene, like the even anti-pop consortium on there. Lots of rappers that would get a big career later on or on this. But this is Shaki, so she's a female rapper with a very androgynous voice. Most of this album is produced by Earl Blaze, who later went on to produce the biggest albums from anti-pop consortiums. And this was released on this offshoot of, I think this was owned by Imago. I think it was like owned by Madonna or something at one point. Anyways, this is a Head Nodo's journey to DD Schism. So this is like very social, conscious hip hop. Not boom bap exactly. It's more like the whole conscious hip hop start, but like much rawer than what came later. This is a great album. You can probably still find it for very cheap. Next, back to Steven Stapleton from Nurse Uzun. Not under his Steven Stapleton Nurse Uzun name, but under his real name, with David Tibet. And this is called The Sadness of Things. And this is two very long, brooding, very depressive cuts, but not depressive, more haunting. It is depressing just because of the title in a way, but this is really absolutely gorgeous, great artwork, and it got reissued last year, I believe. And yeah, this is kind of like ambient folk, drony. This is a great album, really, really great. Next, something that I guess maybe I should play a little. It is a little weird. A band that I think most people have forgotten now, unfortunately. I don't even remember which tracks are this the best one, but let's see. So this is Piano Magic. Piano Magic's first album, Popular Mechanics. Oh yeah. So this is yeah. This is a very strange band from the UK. I guess maybe from Bristol as well. The early stuff is the best. They got kind of semi famous in the late 90s, early 2000s, but the early stuff, the early EPs, and this album, this is where where it is. Like very British, kind of library-inspired library music with weird like synthesizer sounds, but also pop music and very nice singing. Like before Broadcast, and better than Broadcast in my opinion. Now, yeah, this is on Trans Syndicate, I believe. Yeah, the first album from Windsor for the Derby, produced by Adam Wiltsey from Stars of the Lid. This is much different from their later stuff that got more famous. This is like a real post-rock album. You can find it for dirt cheap now, I see. But it is just, I don't know how to. It's like post-rock, but also a little bit like post-industrial, ambientish folk. Very, very solid record, like throughout. Challenging, but beautiful. Now something also difficult to explain with the terrible cover. Global Communication. Pentamerous Metamorphosis, which is basically remixes of the band Chapter House. Chapter House was kind of like in between shoegaze and electronic music, but housey almost, kind of clubby. This double LP that was released. This is a weird. I mean, Global Communication is like a famous British early 90s electro band, like techno electro, ambient. Like their biggest album is 7422 or something. Is like considered an ambient masterpiece. I personally don't like it at all, but that's a different topic. But this is kind of also a direction where that shoegaze could have taken, and it's really fantastic, kind of almost progressive or psychedelic at times, and it got reissued last year, I believe, or so. And I think there's even 2 different labels that reissued this. But this is the original, and this is really great. Another record that like many people will know, and that one that was actually featured by Michael, noted in archives, Tortoise. Millions Now Will Never Die. The first album from Tortoise. Maybe the second one, because there was one weird one, Clusters and something. Anyways, this is the best ones. I believe the D1 Tortoise album to own. I know some people like TNT. No, this is the one. Even if I even prefer the EP Gamera, but this was yeah, slint after slint with. Influenced by gamelan music, essential. A record we've talked about a little bit recently with Michael 45, Gas, Zauberberg, the Thomas Mann novel. This is Mike Inc., Wolfgang Voigt, one of the pioneers of German techno, kind of doing, he's basically sampling modern classical music, looping it, and making one of the most haunting ambient, like pulsing ambient music ever. This is haunting, but like very epic and minimalistic at the same time. But epic in the sense like this is vast, this is widescreen music, and this was released like in '98 on Mille Plateau again. What did I tell you? Really one of the great labels of the 90s. Now, a record that I have an ambivalous connection with, but this is Jim O'Rourke's Bad Timing. This is basically Jim O'Rourke kind of ripping off John Fahey. 4 long tracks, very playful. And this is really great. Outside of his really musique concrète, electroacoustic work, this is the best Jim O'Rourke album. But this is kind of like folk music, psychedelic finger-picking folk music with some even brass at one point. Like really, really great. Now back to the beginnings of the 90s. Midbeat Manifesto, 99%. When electro meets dub, and in post-industrial, fantastic. It is also pop. Like there's songs on this. The track Helter Skelter, which I love. This is just like an album full of hits. If you think like stuff like Front 242 is too much in your face and too square, and this is for you. Really, really great album. There's even like a whole dub version of this. But yeah, I'll play it again, Sam. Now, one of the best rap albums of the 90s in my opinion. Sex Style by Cole Keith. Mostly known for his previous album under the Dr. Octagon moniker. Maybe technically a better album, but this one is more the essence of Cole Keith, like the weirdest ego trips, really almost offensive. Like the artwork is just weird, and I don't know. This is just a fantastic album throughout, very fun to listen to, but also just really, really good flow. I mean, this is Cole Keith used to be in the Sonics, one of the very best hip-hop bands from the 80s. And then back to Too Pure, Face Healers, Seafield, Pram's first album. I love everything from Pram up until their very last album from a few years ago. This is kind of their first EP on Too Pure is one of my top 5 records of the 90s, Iron Lung. But this is the album that came out right after. It's kind of in between the first EP and the next album, which has an Exotica feeling. This is kind of this is from Birmingham. This is music. How would I put it? This is music. Maybe we can put it on. This is space music for autistic children with dub influences. This is kind of if Robert Wyatt had been depressed and a post-punk. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. All their albums are really, really good up until, I mean, there's one that I'm I'm partial with, called North Pole, Radio North Pole Expedition or something. But other than that, you can't go wrong with them. Next, a very odd band, Exquisite Corpse. This is, I believe, from Belgium or maybe Holland. And this is kind of tribal, industrial, post-punk, techno. This was a favorite of Colin Dale from Kiss FM. This is very difficult to pinpoint music. One of the early release on KK Records, the Belgium label. If you're into stuff like Oyuki Conjugate or Zoo, like ethno, industrial, post-punk jazz, this is a really interesting album. Next, an album that I can't find today. I'm just so freaking bummed about it. The infamous Mobb Deep, one of my favorite rap albums from the 90s, mostly for the track Survival of the Fittest, with the most insane piano loop sample you will find in hip-hop history. I still don't know where it's coming from, but absolutely fantastic stuff. Nas, I believe he's on that album. I'm not sure right now, but anyways, the two guys from Mobb Deep, this is their second album, and I believe really their career high, and one of the absolute best rap albums from the 90s. You'll notice that I didn't mention anything Wu-Tang Clan, because this is my top 50, and now let's go to Canada with I think it's his third proper album, Plastic Man. Consumed, a triple or 4 LP set on Mute Records. This is kind of influenced by Thomas Conner and Biosphere, so it's more ambient. Also, the rhythms are less like drum machine-ish, and it's more like pulse. It's kind of the definition of minimalism, and yeah, really great, super strong and cover art concept. Consumed by Plastic Man. Back to rock. Shipping News. Shipping News first album. This is a really, I don't know how to describe it. Save Everything. This was released on Quarter Stick Records. This is post-rock, but also post-hardcore. Some samplers, and in this very versatile music from one of a departed hero of punk rock, modern punk rock. Oh, this track is so good. Well, Shipping News, essential 90s rock. Next, one album many people will have. This is the original pressing with the Bry Seeker, Wars of Canada. Music Has the Right to Children. This is probably one of the easier albums to recommend to people who don't like electronic music and who want to dabble in this. But it's not cheesy. It's not these albums that are kind of soul music produced electronically or whatever, hip hop. This is really a really great electronic music album that will appeal even to Beatles fans, I will say. And it's very charming. It's kind of music nostalgic of a time that never really actually existed. So there is something pastoral about it. Like, this is from the British wilderness. This is like psychedelic. Next, one of the best rock albums of the 90s, in my opinion, maybe the best one actually. I can't think of any other album of the 90s that have such an amount of great tracks, no fillers at all, very homogeneous and yet so much diversity. Michael also mentioned this. This is The Last Splash, Breeder's second album. This is the original from back then, with the 7-inch included. Post Pixies music. The first album was kind of a downer. Interesting, but then there was an EP, Safari, amazing, but couldn't prepare us to this, because this can appeal to anyone. This is mainstream music made in the most independent way. Incredible work with the different microphone sounds, and the recording of this is just probably a story in itself. Something from around the same time, Robert Armani featuring Joy Beltram on one track. This is Chicago basement techno, like post-house music, like after house got deep in the early 90s after it stopped being jacking. You get this basement techno, which is in tribute to old house, Chicago house, but much harder. This is kind of like Midwest acid techno, but a little bit different. And I love all Robert Armani and Joey Beltram, but this one, blow it out. Terrible artwork, but I believe it is his best one, and highly inspirational for me as a producer and as a DJ. Next, a soundtrack on 4AD, Albino Alligator by Michael Brook. The lineup is insane, the musician featured there, but this is the soundtrack to a Kevin Spacey movie, the one movie that Kevin Spacey directed. It's a pretty good huis clos with a great casting: Faye Dunaway, Joey Montega, Matt Dillon, Viggo Mortensen. Just stellar casting. Pretty good movie as well, but like the soundtrack makes it shine even better. Michael Brook is the collaborator of Brian Eno, obviously. He invented the infinite guitar, so this is kind of ambient-ish guitar, like very lush production, very good production values. I believe that like you can still find this pretty easily. Now, something expected, something to be expected from me. Shit, I had this in the shrink since I bought it. Forgot to take it out. Ooh, it feels good. Otaker, Chiastic Slide, their fourth album, and my favorite of them. There's mostly for a track called Tiwi. This is glitchy electro, electronica, abstract electronics with rhythms. But this one's got like I wouldn't say soul, but like empathy, and yeah, it's a double LP. I'll talk about Otaker another time, but this is really essential 90s music, defining album of the 90s. You could say, some would choose Tri Répétaé from there. Some would choose Amber because it's more accessible, ambientish, but this one is, for me, this is really Otaker, and not even trying to be something else. Next, really crucial album for rock and roll, Loop. Loop is let's listen to a little of it, I guess. I hope that like it should be fine. This was on Situation too, so not like a big label. Shouldn't have trouble with copyright. So this is the double LP version. Make sure you get this one. Now, I know there's a single LP. It lacks this track, which is like a monster psychedelic shoegaze, slow shoegaze, a little bit on the post-industrial side of things. The singing comes after like 6 minutes or so, and this was the last album of Loop. Yeah, this is the album with a free 7-inch single as well, which is somewhere up there. Absolutely fantastic. Next, the best techno album ever, because it's 14 tracks, not a single filler. Everything is different. I've already talked about it in a video. LFO's frequencies, house, techno, electro, ambient, pop, joyness, rawness, hardness, quirkiness, punk. No, really, absolutely must-have album of the 90s. This guy produced most of Björk, some Depeche Mode later on, some other bands, even Del from the Freestyle Fellowship, who's Del from 3030. Yeah, this album must have. Now, probably my favorite pop album of the 90s. Unrest, Imperial FFRR. This is on Teen Beat. This is pure candy bar lollipop rock. Most of the songs have a girl name. Yeah, this is just a perfect album. This is a version that comes with a 7-inch with instrumental versions of some of the tracks. Really a great defining album of the 90s as well, of the indie, the American indie. One of the few really perfect albums in that regard, in my opinion. Now something a little crunchier, almost metal. Like we had like Godflesh, now Ministry. The Psalm 69 album. This is when like industrial rock went almost metal, but on this there's one track called Scarecrow, which is like a slow, a bit like this track, very long, like funeral march, apocalyptic, like mesmerizing, really intense, and this was a big album also. But very unique. I mean, there's really nothing that compares to this. So this is really one of the greats of that time. Another great rock album that is completely forgotten. Daisy Chainsaw, 11 Teen, their first album. Kind of like if the B-52s met with Devo, Nirvana, and I don't know. This is just very unique, insanely personal guitar sound. The singer Katie Jane Garside, she she was possessed. This is also this was so difficult to describe, to market back then, because it's also very psychedelic, and yeah, it's like psychedelic grunge. No, it's not grunge. I don't know. It's just almost a zero feeler album. One of the great rock and roll albums of the 90s that tries to push things forward. And unfortunately, the next album they did was way more conservative, and then they split and became went more to the metal side of things. Next, let's put this. Is it the right track? No, it's not the right track. Let's see. This is a very special album also that I think it's getting rediscovered. Yeah, there it is. This is John Beltran. Is he from Detroit? I think so. This is one of the most beautiful techno albums of the 90s. And when I say techno, some people might even find it sounding different than that, but this is 10 Days of Blue on Peace Frog, a British label. And this track, a collage of dreams, there's 2 versions of it on this album, but the rest of the album is pretty good, very soulful techno with this synth that sounds almost like finger-picking guitar. And my last favorite album of the 90s is an album I already shown that is also very specific to the 90s concept, the remix album. Scorn, Mick Harris from Napalm Death, 3rd album remixed by Bill Laswell. And some people we saw here: Otaker, Coil, Meatbeat Manifesto. Yeah, this is insane. Germs, Scanner is also a great 90s ambient electro guy. But this is like a 5 EP box set, and the remix by Coil is just insane. This is one of the landmark tracks from the 90s, and also very defining of new aesthetics that you would hear in 9 Inch Nails, stuff like that. And yeah, probably the track I listened to the most in my in my teen years. Anyways, that was a long one, huh? But yeah, 50 records, like almost an hour. I think we're good. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it will YouTube won't block this. And I'm sure there'll be some things to talk in the comment section here. Of course, there was less jazz and experimental, like modern classical music there, because the 90s were the decade of the indie, techno and hip-hop for vinyl records. That's just how it is. There were just a few exceptions, of course, but for the most part, these were the kind of music that really kept vinyl alive, hence what we've been talking about today. And I don't know if I'll do that again for other decades, but I'm pretty confident that this is a list that will hold, and that is of course personal, but pretty on point on lots of things that were happening. Of course, there's a few things, like I have my own biases, Wu-Tang Clan, but yep, let's see what you guys think in the comment section, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.